It happened early Christmas morning. 3 power substations in the Tacoma area
on criminal complaints for conspiring to attack our local power grid.
We're back with some new details out of North Carolina, where thousands of people are still without power.
Early on Thanksgiving Day morning, we did have an attack on a substation.
A man and a woman accused of planning to attack the power grid in the Baltimore area.
The firearm had been used to disable the equipment.
You know, some of those news stories are not new to you. Some of you have heard about all of them. Some of you have heard about some of them. And there's probably a lot more out there that didn't make the public appearance that some of those stories did. But that's really where we want to focus today and spend our time talking about substation security, compliance, and some technologies that are out there that are continue to mature at a very rapid pace. Before we get into it, what I'd like to do is have Nick Weber from Archer and Mike Arnold from acoem introduce themselves. Mike, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, so thank you, Mark. Glad to be here. Excited to talk about this subject and go a little bit more in depth on new technologies and all the SIP standards. But I've been working with acoem for over a decade now on two sides of the fence, either on our industrial maintenance side, dealing with rotating equipment, and then most recently in the last couple of years, I've been tasked with bringing some of our defense technology to the public sector, mainly being our acoustic threat detection sensors and gunshot detection technology. So glad to be here. acoem's a global company, and we'll go a little bit more in depth in a minute. So
wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Nick?
Hey, Nick Weber with Archer, managing partner, lead our physical security practice, and we focus on securing critical infrastructure.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. And thank you both for taking some time today. I think for the audience, I'd like to maybe just set the stage a little bit. We want to make this as conversation as possible. We've got several questions that we're gonna go through and just have a conversation on. We've got a couple slides to guide the conversation a little bit. But for those of you that would like to ask some questions at the bottom of the screen, you can either send a chat and send it directly to us, or you just type it in the question section, and everyone can see the question section there as well. And we'll answer them kind of at the time they come in, and would love just to hear from all of you. Maybe what I'd like to start with first is we've got a poll question at the bottom. You'll see a section called polls, I believe, and we'll pull the first poll up. And really, what I'd like to hear from you is what's your largest concern as it relates to substation security. So go ahead and click on the polls, and you can select: is it security, reliability, safety, or compliance? And I know for some of you it's all four. I get it, but if you had to pick one, what would that be for you?
And Mark, they can check more than one box if they choose to on this one.
Great.
Right.
Yeah, so feel free to check as many as you'd like. So it looks like we're pretty much all at security and reliability, compliance not being a top two concern, and so we're about 50-50. So that's probably to be expected. Nick and I talked about this a little bit coming into this conversation. So Nick, why don't we just start with the compliance side of things, just to maybe knock the dust off here a little bit as it relates to NERC SIP compliance and substations. So you and I have had a chance to spend some time together the last couple of weeks, going on site to a couple of clients for some SIP 14 consulting engagements. So Nick, maybe start with what are some of the key factors that you regularly discuss with the clients on compliance?
The biggest one, and I think that this poll bears it out, is that when you've got security and reliability nailed down, the compliance follows usually pretty easily. And the big things you're looking for are really, how do you bring security and reliability together, particularly in the SIP 14 stage, to prevent, I call them the three magic terms in SIP 14. It's instability, uncontrolled separation, and cascading within an interconnection. Everything beyond that in a substation, now you're getting into security and making risk-informed business decisions. But the compliance piece is, how do you protect the BES? one of these days I'm going to actually get brave enough to sing the Meghan Trainor song, but all about the bez instead of bass, because that's really what SIP 14 focused on at this point. And I think that was one of the big takeaways last year with the congressional hearings and in the NERC technical conference last summer was, you told us to protect the grid, we did. And that's been the takeaway. That said, is that the right spot to be? And that's a whole different conversation. But I think that was I think Brian Harrell was probably one of the first high profile people to come out and say that. You said protect the BES, and we've done that. So that's really the focus when we look at SIP 14 and these substations is, let's start with the big thing first. Let's not have another major outage.
Thank you for that. Mike, referencing the video a little bit, you've seen more and more of this play out in the industry as well. Maybe share some perspectives on some of the incidents that we're not going to talk about any specific incident per se, but share your perspectives on a couple of these incidents.
Just the main thing is that they're becoming more and more frequent. So it seems like in the last 2 years, getting more and more phone calls, seeing more and more news articles. I saw a piece on 60 Minutes a few months ago where they talked about this, critical infrastructure. And it's not just organized terrorist threats, which is a big concern, but it's also, some teenager that wants to sight his rifle in, after he's hunting, and the only thing he has to shoot at is maybe a transformer or some insulators or something like that. So it's happening more and more. We're seeing it in the news more and more, and it's more of an everyday occurrence.
Thanks, Mike. Nick, what about from your perspective? Anything additional to add there?
No, I think Mike really nailed it. Is that we tend to start with the Tom Clancy terrorist threat, doing the Michael Bay type explosion, and the reality is when you start peeling the onion back to what is our concern, it really comes down to it's lower level, it's opportunistic, or it's someone who's got an axe to grind against a local area, like we saw in North Carolina. I know we can't officially say that was the motive behind those attacks, but haven't seen anything else. And unofficially, we've heard that actually was to turn off power to an area because of a disagreement with what the community was doing. And that tracks with some of the distribution ones we've seen going back. I think of the Garcane Electric one, some of the issues we saw, I think in Wisconsin, close to 10 years ago, where they were attacking distribution stations to get specific feeders because they're upset with a neighborhood or homeowners association. Yeah. So I think we're seeing a lot of that moving forward, to where people are realizing they can use infrastructure to attack something else as a proxy attack.
Yeah, and we only really hear about the ones that have damage. So there's no telling how many hundreds or thousands of substations or critical infrastructure that are shot at and even hit, just not damaged, because either the caliber is too small or they don't hit the right thing. So we only hear about it when it's bad. So, but it is happening more and more every day. So.
And I think the Tacoma attacks also are another one where clearly the substation wasn't the primary target. It was to get to the store target. We're seeing more of that. So I do expect to see more focus on the load served as we get into things similar to what the CPUC has done out in California. But I think the takeaway from I look at the three big attacks in late 22 and 23 is that very few people, I think, have really completely got this security side figured out, because it's hard and it's expensive. But what we have seen are that the security leadership at those utilities have made sure that it wasn't catastrophic. To steal a quote from one of my friends in the industry, we moved the decimal point in the right direction in the outcome there. And whether it was the ability to capture and apprehend and hopefully get the charges to stick in Tacoma, to prevent that instability separation cascading like we saw in North Carolina. Either way, I think there's a win there. It may not be perfect, but it's a win.
That makes sense. Nick, kind of going down where you were there a little bit, talk a little bit about some of the technologies, and not just technologies, it's also process related. Some of the things that that you're seeing utilities do differently to detect and deter a little bit more than, maybe differently than they have in the past.
So one of the things I'm really starting to see, and I'd be lying if I said some of it wasn't driven by the economy and then the tightening on the interest rates this last year, where people are being more focused into being asked harder questions. Why do you need this? Why do you need this particular technology? So the security leaders and the risk and compliance folks who are involved in that are really starting to do their homework and doing a lot more analysis into a full risk assessment rather than just a high-level threat and vulnerability assessment that hits the bare minimum of SIP 14R4. They're starting to pull in some of the ISO guidance and standards on risk assessments. Really diving into, okay, what are we truly vulnerable to that will create that unacceptable consequence, whatever that is. Which for SIP 14 is instability, separation, cascading. What creates that unacceptable consequence? Who can do it? How can they do it? Let's reverse engineer that back, and let's start putting in, let's take steps out of their kill tree, out of their kill chain, to make sure they can't do that before we have the ability to at least mitigate that attack. And that's where you're seeing very targeted solutions. And honestly, I love that, because one of the things that it makes my heart hurt is seeing a massive, glorious build out of Fort Knox around a substation that didn't need it. Because I know that means somebody's electric bill went up. It might have been mine. But that's one of those things that it just was beat into me when I was at Grant, that every dollar I spend is coming out of my ratepayer's pocket. So I need to make sure I can look at them in the grocery store and explain this is why I did this. And you're seeing that so much more, where you're seeing that very focused, maybe there's a ballistic path in this area that can get to a critical asset. So you're seeing detection focused around that ballistic path, or you're seeing deterrent or other mitigation measures taking that ballistic path away. To me, that's just the right answer across the board, because then you truly understand what your threat is doing. And it's a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. We're seeing a lot more of that, and the technologies are getting so much better to support that.
And combining multiple technologies, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So
absolutely. Well, yeah, go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
I always use the Swiss cheese analogy we see in safety all the time, that everything's got a hole, but we're going to stack up all those pieces of Swiss cheese, and there's not a single hole that goes all the way through.
Yep.
That's the way to look at substation security.
It's perfect, and now I'm hungry. Thank you for that, Mike. Why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about, Nick kind of led into it a little bit, but talk about the acoem acoustic detection and some of the things that Nick kind of teed up there, and I think I'll even say, with that scalpel approach, not the sledgehammer approach, right? So, Mike, take it away and spend a little bit of time and talk to us about it.
Yeah, so acoem developed acoustic threat detection back in the 90s for U.S. Army and NATO during the Bosnian conflict, and they developed that artificial intelligence and acoustic threat detection, throughout 3+ decades. We were fortunate enough to be able to, and myself was tasked with releasing this technology to the public sector. We kind of revamped it just a little bit as far as the form factor, the size, and a few other things for public consumption. And when we took it to market, what we're used to dealing with is high crime areas, school safety, and we slowly started seeing the need for critical infrastructure monitoring, and people there's a true ROI on this stuff when it comes to the critical infrastructure and the components in substations or pipelines or chemical plants and stuff like that. So acoem has been dealing in this type of artificial intelligence, this type of technology, since the Clinton administration. So we're pretty good at it, and it has gotten so much better over the years. I just kind of talked about the applications we're dealing with: cities, landscapes, high crime areas. We just did a big install in South Carolina last week on 5 different schools. We have some corporate campuses. Sports venues are starting to be more popular. But with SIP 14 regulations and substations, that is like a steamroller effect right now, and it is growing and growing more. Not just every month, but almost every day. We have people reaching out to us. So what kind of sets our technology apart, Mark? And we've talked about this before. It's not just about detecting a loud noise. It's about giving situational awareness, giving as much information, because whether we say, like we talked about earlier, whether it's an organized attack or whether it's just some teenager out, sighting in a rifle or just shooting at whatever he wants to, knowing that that's happening is key. So if there is damage, you know about it in real time. You know about shots being fired in real time. And what sets our technology apart is that ability to detect between, a car backfiring, a fireworks show on 4th of July, or an AK-47 or AR-15 shooting at a transformer, even if they're all in the same area. So we have the ability to give those alerts, distinguish between those alerts, and also give audio information, mapping information. And the big part is the fact that we can pair with a PTZ camera and we slew the cue to where that threat came from. So not only do we say, hey, there's a gunshot at this substation or this switch yard, but hey, here's where it came from. Here's the audio file, and here's the video going with it, all in real time. So in less than 3 seconds, you have eyes, ears, and mapping. And that's a huge force multiplier.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Nick, you've seen acoustic detection deployed in the field. And I'll ask it both ways, and you can kind of go get around to it. But what have you seen out in the field that makes a successful deployment versus one that maybe wasn't as successful?
So the biggest one is the analysis and thought that went into selection and design of the system. We've seen a number of them where there was a decision to do a one-size-fits-all, and we need acoustic detection, so we're going to use this solution everywhere. And that's usually where you see struggles. One of the other issues that almost always follows that is the organizations that make a decision similar to that, it seems like anecdotally are less likely to stay current on evolving technology and understanding, even keeping their systems fully tuned up to what they can do as the technology on top of the device evolves. And then you end up with life cycle maintenance. It just seems like when that's done anecdotally, again, I don't have any data to back it up, that's usually where you'll see a lot of issues with, oh, this zone is down or this piece is down. And there isn't as much redundancy built in. The ones I've seen that are just, I walk away going, okay, if they get it, nothing more to see here. There's a level of redundancy built in. It's designed around, we're really concerned about specific ballistic paths. Again, they've done that analysis to know where they're vulnerable versus where there isn't a line of sight from a shooting point outside the perimeter. It's done in concert with the ability to slew a camera to the anticipated shooting points because they've identified where that point is, and they've got either a fixed or a PTZ camera that can get to that point once they have that detection to make that assessment. Those are some of the big differences. Again, I'm going to come back to it. It's the sledgehammer and scalpel. The better ones that I've seen are using that scalpel approach, and they can tell you exactly why they have the sensors arrayed the way they do. That's the single biggest difference, I think, between the two.
Wonderful. Mike, I know you got the slide up here of, why, what makes acoem different or unique. Maybe show a couple slides of, you showed me the kind of the video of it in real action and how it works maybe differently than others out there.
Yeah. So before I jump into that too, though, Mark, talking about what makes it unique, the technology, we blow everything else out of the water, but the big advantage is that we can build the people's systems, right? So giving them the ability to pick and choose where they want these sensors. We don't need a network of sensors to localize a threat. So we fit perfect into the footprint of most of these substations with one, maybe two sensors. Each one of our sensors covers a 500-foot radius. So we almost fit perfect in that form factor of a standard substation. And that gives people the ability to say, okay, we don't need to cover a whole square mile of sensors. We can put it here at this remote substation and get information in real time there. The other thing that sets us apart is the fact that we let the end user control that gunshot program. We're not middleman information. We're not filtering data as it comes in. They're getting data in real time. And the reason we can do that is because of our embedded artificial intelligence. So we have the confidence to let the end user take control of this program once it's installed and integrated and let them work with it. This is a quick screenshot of our software that kind of runs in the background. We can integrate into your current VMS, your current CAD, your current access control system, AMAG, or Vigilon, Access, you name it. As long as the cameras are NDAA compliant and they have on-VIF protocol with the PTZ, we can plug right into them. We can have custom solutions. We're working on custom solutions for a couple big players right now in the energy sector to work with their AMAG and access control systems. So we have that ability. So the big thing is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to plug into your wheel as a new spoke and make it run even smoother. So being able to adapt to people's systems are a huge thing. So that's kind of what makes it unique. And I'll jump to that video real quick, Mark.
And while you're doing that, well, actually, I'll let you show the video first, then I'll ask the question. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll kind of set it up. What you're looking at here is four different sensors paired with 4 different PTZ cameras. So what you'll see is the guy on the right here with the AR-15, you'll be able to see that's a fixed camera. You'll see when he shoots, and you'll see how the other 4 cameras react to that shooting. So this is all in real time. So, what I've seen with most of the latency on cameras, are less than a second for that slew to queue. If somebody fires one shot, we typically have them on camera as they're pulling the gun down. If they fire more than one shot, we typically have them firing the second shot. So having that information on a map, having alarms, having it work with your access control or even your PLC, DCS, any of your control systems that you have, plugging that in is huge, and having that situational awareness to know if you need to shut down a component before it overheats and fails or whatever. So,
excellent. Thanks, Mike. I put up another poll question here just to kind of understand who's got experience with shot detection solutions. And as the poll question goes up here, if you want to answer the question and as it relates to if you've ever, leveraged a solution like that, maybe not your current environment, but do you have experience with them elsewhere? So the polls are right down in the middle at the very bottom. Mike, maybe talk, another question that I'd like to ask you, Mike, is as you've seen the solution deployed, what, from your perspective, when they've been deployed, your acoem acoustic threat detection solution, what has driven some of the decisions that have gone into what and how they're going to deploy it?
A lot of it has to do with location of the substation, size of the substation. What we're seeing, a lot of them have either they're in a high crime area or places where people are riding by just popping off shots, or it's the complete opposite where they're so far out in the middle of nowhere where there's not anybody out there that on a regular basis, and they need to know what's going on. So it has a lot to do with location. And then obviously the components in that yard. So, and Nick can kind of go with that. So the voltage and stuff like that. So.
Very good. Nick, I'm going to kind of lead the witness on this question a little bit, only because I was with you last a couple weeks ago when we talked about this. But solutions like this in conjunction with you even mentioned it earlier, some of the operational alarms. When you're looking at overall detection and security, can you talk a little bit about some of the operational alarm conversations you've been having with clients?
Yeah, one of the things that we see that gets overlooked on the security and even the compliance side a number of times around the substations is the system health alarms that are out there. A low gas alarm on a breaker or low oil on a transformer that our system operators are used to seeing day in and day out, and they understand. They can even sometimes correlate things that are happening, or at least make a pretty educated guess on what's happening in a substation based just on those. We saw some of that in North Carolina last year. And that's where I come back with the security people and say, hey, you got to help them out. This is where you can tie your sensors that you have with your cameras and your detection measures. You got to feed that into those system operators in a way that makes sense for them. That was one of the biggest takeaways I've seen when we start doing SIP 14 exercises is there's generally an assumption from security people that anything they send to system operations is too much and they're inundating them. System operations wants to know what's happening in their substations. The more they know, the quicker they can get to the right decision. And that's really from my super limited understanding of what system operators do, aside from black magic and Hogwarts stuff, to make sure that my lights stay on.
Yep.
It's helping them get to the right decision faster.
Yeah, and look, I came from that world. I'm not, I don't have hundreds of years in the security world. I came from the reliability and predictive maintenance world, and that's what I grew up on. My family had a business that did that, and our job was eliminating downtime, keeping components running. So when I switched over on one side of the acoem fence to the other side, dealing with this, this is a perfect match in the energy sector and pipeline, anything with critical infrastructure, because those operators need to know that stuff in real time, because all these guys are worried about is downtime. And it doesn't matter whether it's, a vibration problem, an infrared problem, a misalignment problem, or a gunshot problem. It all feeds back to the same, threat, which is downtime, and that's huge. So this does cross reliability and security at a different level that is pretty neat. So
yeah, and you can put that detection piece into the operator's hands of, hey, there's somebody shooting not only around our substation, into our substation.
Yep.
And they can start to take measures to de-energize the components that are being targeted, because they know where that shot's coming from and what's being targeted based on that analysis that was done before. Now you're talking about the ability to, maybe you have to go out and replace some bushings and get some gas back in there, or replace some fins on a transformer and put oil back in. That's a much cheaper, faster, easier recovery than ordering a new transformer or ordering and installing a new breaker.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for that. Nick, the physical security compliance standard, i.e. SIP 14, is really undergoing a review right now. Can you talk about what folks may want to think about or consider changes that will, I won't say likely be coming, but we don't have our crystal ball here, but you're definitely involved in those conversations. So what are you hearing and seeing out there as far as pending changes?
So reading the SAR, the standard authorization request that went in to get this ball rolling, the R1 component is absolutely going to change. And I think we're going to see more stations brought into scope. At a minimum, I think you're going to see the standard have a hard line requirement to conduct dynamic flow studies. That's something that's been kind of backed into a compliance requirement, I would say, the last couple of years. I think that's going to be hard baked in as you have to do this. You're going to see a much more prescriptive R1, I think, is what we're going to come out with. It's probably going to yield for a lot of utilities more substations coming into scope. That's the one I'm most confident in. Then we get into my wish list of things that I really hope we see, particularly in R4. And that is getting R4, maybe not more prescriptive, but at least something that a security manager can take back to say, hey, this is what I have to go do. I at least have to be able to do these things. And for me, I don't think they'll go so far as to say you have to develop design basis threat specific to that substation and then conduct a vulnerability of integrated security analysis, or VISA methodology to that. But I think they're going to put that in between the lines on that, which I would love to see. For those who don't know, to me, that takes a lot of this out of the subjective side. It makes it way more objective. There's always some subjectivity involved when you're going through that analysis, but it's subjectivity on a very granular level that when you step back and look at the big picture, it's a happy little tree, happy little mistake, not, oh my gosh, we just ruined the whole painting kind of approach there. So I'd love to see more of that. One of the things that I'm also just really hoping is that we can take control centers out, because there are so many other controls around the security and reliability of the control center that SIP 14 just kind of seems like a bit of a whiff on that one. At the state and local level, the crystal ball is kind of hazy there still, but my expectation is that if we have another high profile spate of attacks like we saw this time last year, you're going to see a number of other states that have something already in the holster ready to go that'll be similar to that CPUC D19 standard, where it focuses on making sure that critical load is served. So those are the things that the crystal ball kind of from things I'm most confident to least confident in. But I do hope that any of that, they really reach into the work that's been done, whether it's the ASIS standard for risk assessments or getting into the ISO 31000 series on risk assessments, and leverage what's already been done around a lot of that, because there's real good work out there.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. As we kind of wrap up here, first of all, to the audience out there, thank you guys for joining us again. Throw some questions out there in either the questions or the chat. We'll get to them. Mike, I'll kind of, as we kind of wrap up, I'll kind of give you kind of final thoughts from Mike Arnold's desk on the whole topic of security and technology out there. And take it away, Mike.
Yeah. Just basically what I said at the beginning, that, we're getting more and more phone calls every day. There's more and more threats coming up. So this is something we're seeing more and more, on a weekly basis. We'll be next year, we're going to be in a few hundred new substations with our technology. So, on both sides of the states, East Coast, West Coast, and a few in the middle. And like I said, our phone is ringing every day. So and we're happy to work with other technology. So like I said before, it's not just what we do. We're joining forces with 3 or 4 other major technology providers on different levels to make that one, like you said, put the Swiss cheese together. So pretty excited. So and look, another thing, while we're waiting on questions, seeing is believing this stuff, right? And when I met Mark and Nick the first time, just Googling SIP14 and trying to understand a few things about it, I just picked up the phone and called Mark, and we had a 30-minute conversation. And it was about 2 weeks later, Nick is in Florida with us at a live fire event, and people can talk about this stuff all the time, but when you see it in real life and you see that trigger pull and you see that alarm come up and you see that camera move, and it's pretty powerful. So we're going to do some live fire events, East Coast and West Coast in Q1 of 24. So, and if you'd like us to come out, people that are on board or people that are watching this in the future on YouTube, if you want us to come out, reach out, we'll set something up in your area. And seeing is believing. So we'll put our money where our mouth is. So
wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Nick, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, the last thing I would say on this one is don't wait for a compliance regulation to require you to do this. Some of the clients that we've done a lot of work with, particularly this last year, have looked at this and said, this is a business issue. I'm thinking of one in particular I worked with over the summer. We went through and, first of all, categorized their substations into tiers, into this is hypercritical to us. We can't afford to lose this. Maybe there's a regulation around it, maybe not, down to this is going to impact a local distribution area. We still want to protect it accordingly. And then went through and did an assessment on each one and said, all right, this is what we need to make sure that we are getting that reliability to our customers, to our ratepayers. Compliance, totally aside. And where they're in a position now with that moving forward is if somebody came through and said, hey, you've got a SIP14 or CPUC D19, every one of your substations, all they got to do is say, cool, here you go. But they've done that from a business perspective. And if their ratepayers come back and say, hey, why did you just spend $500,000 to upgrade that fence? Well, here's why. We wanted to make sure that your meter keeps spinning. They're able to have that as an educated decision. So that's my recommendation is look at the compliance requirements, whether it's SIP14 or the CPUC ones, and start applying that to your business as part of your risk mitigation strategy for your utility. Because at the end of the day, whether the compliance piece is there or not, it's a bad day when you drop a customer, even one, because that's that much revenue you're not bringing in at the top line. So make sure you understand that and you're working with your risk folks to understand. And I recommend the ISAC's been pushing the VISA, Vulnerability Integrated Security Analysis, with the design basis threat. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's effective. And it tells you the things you need to know for your risk piece. So my recommendation, do it before you're told to do it.
Yeah. And Mark, I don't know if you can see the questions, and okay, I'll let you take it.
No, go right ahead. Yeah, I was going to tee you up on it anyway. So the question for the group, if you're just listening in, is I have a fixed camera looking at perimeter. Can I integrate the sensor into these? Mike, that's in your wheelhouse.
Yep, absolutely. So, we can work without cameras. We have some customers that don't even care about the visual side of it in law enforcement. They just want to hear the gunshots and know where they're at. We have some customers that have fixed cameras or multi-sensor cameras that don't allow the slew to queue. So that's not an issue. It's just, you're just not going to have that camera movement. So if you have a fixed camera or a fisheye camera that's looking at a whole substation, but you want to know if a gunshot goes off, because if somebody's shooting 100 yards down the road that fisheye doesn't pick up, that you didn't see him come over a gate or through the woods or wherever he came from, the audio is going to pick up, and then you can use the camera to see, hey, is there damage? Hey, where are they at? And get some of that information. So yes, we can work with fixed cameras.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm going to jump in on that one and say that one of the pieces that this helps with is when you've got a security operations center that may have a couple hundred cameras, it'll get you to the right fixed camera. Your operator doesn't have to go through and go, oh, where was this, and click through.
Oh, yep. Great point, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah. And,
I'm going to go ahead.
And I'll add to that real quick. If you already have existing cameras and they are NDAA compliant, we can fit into your system. So there's no need to replace. If you have an existing system, whether it's, access control, VMS, cameras, all that stuff, we're a plug and play solution to what you have. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
At this point, we don't have any other questions, so I think we can probably successfully wrap up. In the chat for everyone, I'm putting my name and phone number and contact information. Mike and Nick, if you want to do the same, feel free. That way, if anyone has any questions, you know how to reach out to us and ask us any questions outside of this. Always happy to engage. If you'd like to pull us in, and I'll even throw a poll up here as we close out, seeing if anyone needs any specific outreach, sooner rather than later. Nick, myself, Mike, we're happy to jump on a call with you and your team and assist in any way that we can. So with that, if there's no other questions, then in that case, I think we're wrapped. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Enjoy some family time. I know how hard you all work, so enjoy, and we look forward to chatting with you hopefully soon and into the new year. So thank you. Mike, Nick, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.